Okay, everybody, thank you for being here. Welcome. This is our session on romance novels and the skeleton blurb. So, hopefully, after you have completed this class, you'll be able to describe your novel in one sentence that's going to help you really focus on your story, whether you're outlining, writing, or editing. So, let's go ahead and dive in. Whoops, I just skipped over. Who am I? For those of you who are new, my name is Linda O'Donnell, and I'm a certified Fictionary story coach editor and a certified Fictionary instructor. I also happen to be a certified copy editor. I am writing romance, love romance. I'm all about the happily ever after. And I am so proud to say that I'm the co writer of the upcoming book, Secrets to Writing a Romance, which I had the incredible experience of writing with Christina Stanley, our CEO. I think it's going to be a real great resource for anybody who's writing romance, whether it's at the main story level or as a subplot. There's so many things that we discovered. So I hope that you'll check it out. It's supposed to come out, I think, around the end of August. So looking forward to that. Okay, so here's some of what we're going to talk about today. I want to make sure that you know you're writing a romance. We're going to kind of talk about what the high level genre guidelines are for romance. I'm going to help you find your protagonist, and we will then write what we call a skeleton blurb. And don't worry, I am going to tell you what those are in case you've never heard that term before. Okay, so let's talk first about the high level genre guidelines for romance. So first of all, the story it's about the romance. It's about two characters finding love. Now, you can have other things going on in your story, but the main part of your story should be really about the romance. And we're not going to go into it too much in today's session. You may have a subplot. You may have a goal that involves something else, maybe something even outside the genre. Maybe you've got a mystery subplot. Maybe you've got a thriller, or maybe even a some kind of a fantasy or something, something that isn't related. But you want to, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But you want to make sure that there's a way to weave those two together. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Now, the other thing about when you're writing a romance is you can't just have your couple meet and then run off to Vegas and get married. They have to have some obstacles, some stumbling blocks, some things that kind of prevent them from going from, goo goo eyes across the room to, walking down the aisle. We have to give them something that will cause some issues, maybe some conflicting goals. What if they're both vying for the same promotion? Maybe they come from families that have had a history of rivalry. Maybe he's just opened up a bakery right across the street from hers to compete with her. Um, Maybe he works for the company that wants to tear down Main Street where her family business is and turn it into an industrial complex. There's going to be some definite obstacles to them finding their happily ever after. The next thing that your story needs, you have to have a reason for your characters to spend time together. We call this forced proximity. If you don't give your characters time to really get to know each other, then it's really kind of implausible for the relationship to develop into love. So you can do this in a lot of different ways. There's so many different ways. You can have them trapped. The storm has closed the airport, and they are stuck sharing the last hotel room in the city. Maybe they work at the same place, and they've been assigned to a big project together. Maybe they decided that they're both volunteering at the local animal shelter. Whatever situation you can create that provides them the opportunity to spend time together and get to know each other, this is really critical. Then, this is a non negotiable. If you are going to market your book as a romance, then your couple has to have a happy ending. HEA, happily ever after, can be a happy for now. It doesn't have to be that they're off getting married or anything like that. but you want to show your readers that they are committed to each other, happy together, and and we see a future for them. So the difference between a romance and a love story is that love stories typically do not have the happily ever after moment. If you take an author like Nicholas Sparks, for instance, he writes the most beautifully exquisite love stories. But they often, I mean, he does have a few that I would say qualify as a romance, but often they have bittersweet or even tragic endings. If you think about The Notebook, I think most people know The Notebook. And it's a beautiful story about this love that endures for decades and through illness. But and spoiler alert, they die at the end. So I don't think that that's much of a happily ever after. You want to leave your readers feeling uplifted, kind of maybe even swooning, like, "Oh, isn't this wonderful? They found love." That's really what you want in your romance. So let me give you the intro here to what we call a skeleton blurb. It's basically taking your story and boiling it down to a single statement. That is the beauty of the skeleton blurb. It allows you to encapsulate your story in just one sentence that has three parts. We have the protagonist, and I'm going to show you how to find your protagonist. We have a goal. What is that goal? It is some form of getting to that happily ever after moment. We're going to talk about what those kinds of goals should be. And then what's at stake? What happens if they don't achieve that goal? Well, they're not going to get to that happily ever after. Now, if you have other plots going on, they have to be secondary to this, because this is what makes it a romance. You can have other things going on, but your main part of your story needs to be focused on the love story. So why do we do this? Well, it really helps you stay focused on your story, keeps your structure solid. You're going to use this skeleton blurb as you outline or as you write your story, and it's going to keep your story kind of front and center in your mind. And then as you kind of evaluate what you're writing, or what you write and you come back and look at, you'll look at each scene and say, how does this relate to my skeleton blurb? Does this scene address that in some way? And if it doesn't, maybe that scene doesn't belong in your book. Now, you'll get more into that if you take classes here at Fictionary, where we talk about going further into the process. But this is something that can really help you as you're outlining and writing. So let's talk about two of those components in the blurb. First of all, here's what it looks like. The protagonist must and do something. And it's an internal romance goal. So, what does that mean? Well, I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but it has to do with something that the protagonist needs to overcome rather than doing something. The subplot is where they're going to be doing something. Maybe it's like they need to save the family business, or they're going out and getting their CPA, and that could be something that you have kind of, it might even be addressed in the first part of your book. But this is the story long goal that we're going to be talking about. And this is only for you. Nobody else is ever going to see this. Your readers aren't going to see it, your agents or publishers. This is not the thing that goes on the back of the book. This is just that statement that you're going to use to kind of plan your story. So let's talk about what makes a good story goal in romance. And it's unlike other genres. In other genres, we have the very external goal of, oh, I have to figure out who the murderer was, or I have to make sure that they don't blow up the local library, or finding a way to prevent the planet from being annihilated by invasion. In romance, it is all something that is internal to the protagonist. Usually they have a wound. They've been betrayed. Maybe somebody, jilted them at the altar. Maybe they have this negative approach to love because they grew up in a household where, the parents were fighting, or, they've just got this kind of unrealistic view of love being something bad. Or perhaps they have, uh, a misconception about themselves. Maybe they feel like they're unworthy. Maybe they feel like, oh, I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. I don't come from the right social circles. Whatever it is, that's a misconception, but it's preventing them from really being able to participate in a love relationship because they just have this flaw. And that is the core of what you need to address in your romance story. So because the other thing is that your character needs to show this growth. And that's what romance readers really come to love and expect in a romance story, because we love to see how our characters overcome those misconceptions. And if you can make it something that's super addressable, like, the readers really get it. They know that this can be achieved. They know they can overcome that thing of feeling unworthy, or that feeling that they can't trust anybody. And they understand it. It's relatable. They feel empathy for your character. And that's what like really hooks your readers, because they're like, "Oh, wow, I can totally get what that person's going through." They love that. So then the other thing, and this one's kind of easy, the easy part is the story stakes in a romance are all about, the putting in peril that happy ending. If I don't get over my feeling of being insecure, of feeling I'm not worthy, I'm not going to have my happily ever after. Because if I can't love myself, then how do I expect somebody else to love me? So the stakes in a romance are really all some form of that happy ending, that declaration of love. So that makes that part easy. So the most common romance writing and editing question is, and it might even be across other genres as well, is who's the protagonist? And you might think it's a really easy question to answer, but it's not always as clear as you might think. One thing that gets confusing is sometimes we have more than one character that we're in their point of view. We're going to talk about the difference between protagonist and point of view here. So, the protagonist is the main character who's pursuing that story goal across your entire book. They have either the most to win or lose, or or may have the most growth, the most character growth to overcome. So, this is a story level character who needs to achieve their goal in order to find love. Now, if you are still confused about this, let me just add a few more things and I'll make you more confused. This may or may not be the point of view character in a scene. I'm going to give you some examples, but just kind of want to lay this groundwork for you here to see that your protagonist doesn't have to have the point of view in every scene. So let's talk about point of view so you can kind of get where I'm coming from. So the point of view character is the one whose head we're in for a scene. We are hearing their thoughts, we are seeing what they see, feeling what they feel. They're touching, they're smelling, they're tasting. It's everything from their point of view. It's like we have the camera, that from they're inside their head, looking at the world around us. Now, so the point of view goal character has a scene goal that they're trying to accomplish. Maybe if you have, say, the traditional male and female love interests, maybe, and she might be the protagonist, but maybe he's like got a scene where he's like thinking about things that she's said and done and thinking about how much attracted he is to her. And in that scene, his goal is to get her to go on a date with him. So that is his goal for the scene, even though he's not the one chasing the story goal. So for every scene in your book, you've got a character that holds the point of view. Now, you may decide to write your entire book from a single point of view, and that's fine. A lot of books do that. But when you have two characters that are kind of shifting between points of view, then it gets a little confusing. Do I have a single protagonist or a combined protagonist? Well, let's kind of look through a couple of examples and see what we think. So I've got these two books. One is called The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory, and the other is Just Don't Fall by Emma St. Clair. They're both contemporary romance novels. What these books have in common and why I've chosen them to show you today is that they are both commercially successful and they both use a dual narrative. So that means that we see scenes from both love interests' point of view. So in The Wedding Date, we've got Alexa and Drew. They're the love interests. We see some scenes written from Alexa's point of view, some are written from Drew's. And then in Just Don't Fall, we've got Parker. We see some scenes from her point of view, and we see some scenes from Logan's point of view. So, what does that mean? Okay, well, here's the key. What are their goals? When they have different goals and different stakes, then you have to treat it as a single protagonist. Now, I'm going to give you the example so you can see how this works. When they have the same goal and the same consequences, then they are a combined protagonist. Now, again, but this is not same as point of view. We're going to talk about that some more. Let's look at the examples. So bear with me. I'm going to read the back of the book blurb for you on this book. Before Logan Barnes was hockey's hottest bad boy, he was my brother's best friend and my first crush. Oh, yeah, and the guy who ghosted me and broke my teenage heart. Now Logan is back in Harvest Hollow, but not willingly. Recovering from an injury and some bad press, he's stuck playing for our minor league team, which means I'll be working with him almost daily. As the hockey team's social media manager, it's my job to wrangle all the guys into filming TikTok trending videos. But Logan doesn't want to be wrangled. Turns out neither does my heart. Because my old crush never died. And when Logan becomes my accidental fake boyfriend, those old feelings flare hot enough to melt the ice. But this is all totally one-sided. Totally fake, isn't it? No matter what signals he seems to be giving me or how real things start to feel, I know Logan's not home for good. I survived Logan leaving me once, but this time I'm not sure my heart will recover. Now, there's a clue here, and I don't know if anybody's going to pick up on this clue, but do you see who's speaking in this blurb? It is just Parker speaking. So there's only one person's point of view in this, which I think is kind of a clue. So what we did was I put this into Fictionary, and if you're new to Fictionary, this is what the blurb will look like. And I created, when this is what you do, you have a protagonist test. I'm not sure if it's Logan or if it's Parker. So I created a skeleton blurb for Parker, and here's what it is. Parker must overcome her fear of being hurt again. Otherwise, she won't find love. So you see the stakes. The stakes are she won't find love. Her goal is she's got to overcome that feeling that she's going to get her heart stomped on again. Well, here is Logan's goal. He must learn to express his feelings. Otherwise, he won't find love. Now, they have the same goal, and that is to find love, or stakes, I should say, but his goal is different than hers. And so in this case, only one of them can be the protagonist. Well, I happen to know if I'm writing this book that she's going to have a much bigger character arc and much more of the scenes. And so we make Parker our protagonist. So let's look at The Wedding Date. Here's the blurb. Love wasn't part of the deal. On the eve of his ex's wedding festivities, Drew Nichols is minus a +1 until a power outage strands him with the perfect candidate for a fake girlfriend. Agreeing to go to a wedding with a guy she gets stuck with in an elevator is not something Alexa Monroe would normally do. But Drew's proposal proves hard to resist. After their wedding date turns into a whole weekend of fun in San Francisco, Drew and Alexa return to their all-consuming careers, his in LA and hers in Berkeley. Too bad they can't stop thinking about each other. It could be the long-distance dating disaster of the century, or Drew and Alexa could be just a flight away from what each of them truly wants. Now, here's a clue. Here's a clue here. We've got Drew talking about being part of, his ex's wedding, and then we've got Alexa talking about she wouldn't normally say yes to a guy she meets in an elevator. So that kind of gives us a little bit of a clue. So our protagonist test here to write a skeleton blurb for each of the two love interests. Alexa must overcome her sense of unworthiness. Otherwise, she won't find her happily ever after. And I know this because I've looked at the book. Drew looks like coincidentally must overcome his sense of unworthiness. Otherwise, he won't find his happily ever after. They both have baggage that they causes them to feel really insecure. And so, because of that, we can make them a combined protagonist. They have the same goal. They both have to overcome this same wound. Otherwise, they won't find love. So they are a combined protagonist. But remember, even though we've got a single protagonist in Just Don't Fall, which is Parker, we still get scenes that we will see from Logan's perspective. And the combined protagonist in The Wedding Date, we see scenes from both Alexa and Drew's perspective. So you can do that strategy. And I'm gonna talk, I think I mentioned, yes, they're both written from multiple points of view. And you can have as if that's what works for you, great. I'm gonna talk a little bit about why you might choose one or the other. We have our romance skeleton blurb now. We know what our story goal is and our stakes. Now, we're not going to touch on this too much today, but I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of what an external skeleton blurb looks like. You're almost always going to have something else going on in your book. Again, it might be solving that mystery, or it might be landing the dream job, and you might resolve it earlier in the story, or if it's something that runs for the whole course of your book, that's fine too. And in that upcoming romance class that starts on July 31st, we're going to be talking about this. We talk about it in the book as well. So it's a good thing to think about, because here's the thing: when you have this external plot, you want to make sure that it supports your romance. You want to kind of weave it in naturally. You don't want to have these like two things that don't go together at all. Use that external plot to bring your characters together, to force them to spend time together, or to cause conflict, or to cause something that maybe unites them. It's a great way to enhance your romance, but don't let it overpower your romance. So here's a book that I wanted to show you how to create the skeleton blurbs. So in this book, Hannah is she's a bodyguard. So it's an interesting take on a traditionally male role, and they've kind of done a little flip on it. And she's this little bitty person, but she knows how to protect herself, and she's very strategic. So she makes a really good bodyguard, but she has got some issues. She's had a bad breakup. Her father left when she was young, and so she just doesn't have this confidence in herself, and she feels very unlovable. And let's face it, if you don't love yourself, it's going to be really hard to love, in a relationship. So her skeleton blurb for the romance is that Hannah must learn to love herself. Otherwise, she won't find her happily ever after with Jack. But we have this other thing going on in the book. Turns out Jack is an actor, and he's got a stalker. And this is why Hannah gets assigned to protect him. So her goal in that external blurb is that she must protect Jack, otherwise he'll die. But do you see how these two goals, these two blurbs work together? Because protecting Jack is going to put her in his orbit. She's going to be spending time with him, protecting him, which is the perfect setup for a romance. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention here is that this is just going to get to a little bit. I'm not going to go into a lot of this here, but on your strategy of choosing whether you're going to do just a single point of view for the whole book, which is what this book does, or whether you're going to alternate between your love interests point of view. This book, uses just Hannah's point of view through the entire book. She holds the point of view for all the scenes. Here's why. Her thinking was that Jack is an actor. So Hannah never knows whether he's being sincere when he says he's interested in her. Does he like her? Is he just playing her? What? And by keeping it in just Hannah's point of view, then the reader only knows what Hannah knows. And so it kind of creates this additional tension because as the reader, we don't know if Jack's being sincere. And so her strategy was to keep the reader in the dark as much as Hannah is. But you may want to choose to have both of your characters with having their point of view. But here's what's interesting about that. Then the reader knows what's going on in both their heads, but the characters don't know what's going on in each other's heads. So we've kind of created this knowledge gap because we, the reader, like know more than the two characters. So it's all up to you how you want to do that. So just to recap, we've got three components to our skeleton blurb. One is the protagonist, and you're going to have to decide whether that is a single protagonist or combined. And then remember that goal in romance is all about that internal wound or that lie that they believe about themselves that they must overcome. Or what have they got to lose? They won't have that happily ever after. Okay, remember that is the most important part your romance readers are counting on. No matter what you throw at your characters, they've got that happy ending in their back pocket. All right, I'm going to turn off the recording now and take questions. There we go. Did it say stop recording?